Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Jennifer Parker. We warmly welcome the family of Private William Charles Thomson, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Please sit down if you can do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private William Charles Thomson. William Thomson was born on the 8th of March 1911 in the railway town of Junee in New South Wales. Known as Billy, he was one of 3 children born to railway guard William Thomson Sr. and his wife Roberta. When Billy was an infant, his family relocated to Sydney, settling in the suburb of Granville. He attended the nearby Blackswell Street Public School before going on to study at Granville Technical College. At the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, he was working as a truck driver, delivering furniture in his local area. Billy Thomson enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 7th of March 1941. Assigned to the 3rd Reserve Motor Transport Company, he travelled to Liverpool for a short period of training. During this time, he met a young woman named Esme, and the two had a short romance prior to his departure. Thomson embarked for active service shortly after, and Esme arrived at the docks, too late to tell him that she was carrying his child. Thomson arrived in Singapore on the 24th of April 1941, his unit having been mobilised to provide general transport for troops and cargo. On arrival in Singapore, it was attached to the 11th Indian Infantry Division, engaged in transport operations around positions in North Malaya, where Allied units were preparing for the possibility of war with Japan. In early December 1941, Japanese forces began landing on the northeastern coast of Malaya, and shortly after attacked Pearl Harbor. The invasion was intended to provide the Japanese army with an overland route towards Singapore and its Allied naval base. Private Thomson's 3rd Reserve Motor Transport Company was positioned around Malaya and spent the weeks that followed in a desperate struggle to move men and supplies further south as they retreated towards Singapore. By January 1942, the Japanese had achieved a series of swift victories in the Pacific, and the Allies were forced back as the islands around them began to fall. Private Thomson became ill during his unit's retreat and was transferred to hospital in Singapore for treatment. By the 15th of February 1942, all hope of repulsing the enemy's advance was lost, and the Allies were forced to surrender to the Japanese. Singapore had fallen, and more than 100,000 Allied troops became prisoners of war. After his release from hospital, Private Thomson found himself separated from his comrades, who had been sent to defend Java from further Japanese attacks. He was transferred to the ranks of the 4th Reserve Motor Transport Company and found himself interred at Changi Camp. Plagued by illness, Thomson contracted dengue fever in July 1942 and returned to hospital. He returned to his unit 6 days later, only to develop dysentery in March 1943, resulting in a 3rd hospitalisation. During this time, several groups of Allied prisoners were sent north to Burma. When Private Thomson was released from hospital in April, he found himself among the men of F Force who were amid the last Labour forces to leave Singapore in 1943. The men of F Force were packed into overcrowded railway carriages with little food or water, with many of the prisoners suffering from dysentery and tropical diseases. The train took them overland to Thailand, where on reaching the town of Bang Pong, the prisoners were forced to march over 300 kilometres to the Burmese border, where their new camps were located. Private Thomson and his comrades were put to work building a railway linking Thailand and Burma. The line was to be constructed over 420 kilometres through rugged terrain and dangerous tropical conditions. The prisoners were forced to construct the railway using nothing but hand tools, undertaking hard labour on inadequate rations and nutrition. Isolated in the jungles of Thailand, the prisoners had little access to adequate medicine and supplies and were supervised by vicious Japanese troops who subjected them to beatings and torture. Disease and sickness was rife among the camps. Most prisoners subsisted on a diet comprised almost entirely of polished white rice, which contained few vitamins and little nutritional benefit. Less than 6 months into his ordeal as a prisoner of war, Private Thomson began suffering from dysentery and beriberi. He quickly succumbed to the effects of his illness and died on the 20th of September 1943. He would never meet his son, Fred, who had been born almost 2 years earlier. His final resting place was uncovered after the war, and he was moved to Thun Bayat War Cemetery in Burma, where he lies today beneath the inscription, "Greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life." Billy Thomson was 32 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private William James Thomson, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down in the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.